Mr. Speaker, when you change the social contract that exists between the state and its people, then you must be sure that the people both fully understand the change and that the people also must understand the potential consequences of that change, which must surely follow. Mr. Speaker, this bill changes the social contract. It changes in such a way that the state, in which we have come to absolutely believe is there to support you as appropriate throughout your life, in sickness and in health, for richer and for poorer, as they say, now also, it seems, is about to determine that it now shall play a role and wishes to play a role in ending your life. In the words of this bill, the state now proposes that it will now not only make best efforts to support you in life, it will now also make best efforts to assist you in allowing you to end it. This is a change of huge significance. It changes the role of the doctor and our healthcare professionals. It changes the way our medical services are viewed. It has implications for new criminal offences. It may change the way as we as a society view death. It may create fear and uncertainty amongst the disadvantaged. It certainly puts us at odds with our traditional values, and quite frankly, once this legislation is passed, it can only go one way, and that is to widen and expand to encompass more people and more scenarios. Indeed, since the bill started its life, we have already seen it change. It has already, despite the medical advice in terms of reliability of diagnosis, been changed from 6 months to 12 months. We have heard from one leading proponent of the bill that he has refrained from including unbearable suffering in the legislation at this stage in order to avoid complications. Yes, if I recall correctly, he said at this stage, because it's simply a myth that this legislation cannot be changed and altered. It's a myth to consider that a court, yes, a European court even, cannot under human rights ground rule for or against this legislation. It's a myth to consider that a judgment by the High Court in the Isle of Man cannot impact this legislation. It's a myth to consider that changes to the legislation in other countries may not change or influence the legislation in this nation of ours. A change to include unbearable suffering, for example, would immediately open widespread opportunities for further assisted suicide considerations. We see it in Canada, we can see it in Belgium. Change can happen easily. Now, the Isle of Man Medical Society, as we know, gave evidence, and I quote here, along with a pharmacist in the House of Keys last week, June the 11th, on clause 7th of the assisted dying bill. And we know that the Isle of Man Medical Society has clearly said in their press release that doctors on the island do not want this, that 74% of doctors on the island oppose the bill because of the dangerous impact it will have on vulnerable groups in society, including the elderly, the disabled, and those with mental health problems. These are not my words. These are the words of the Isle of Man Medical Society. Doctors on the Isle of Man will be acting against GMC regulations if they are involved in this, and will be putting their licence to practice and therefore their jobs and livelihood at risk. This bill is clearly condemned by most professionals. It lacks due diligence. It risks severely shortening the lives of many vulnerable people. It distracts from the urgent problems in Manx health and social care. It turns on its head the dictum, first of all, do no harm, offering killing in place of caring. It is unfunded, but it is requiring inordinate amounts of expensive MHK and government officer time, and despite all this, is being allowed to progress by MHK. They're not my words, they are quoted words from press release from the Isle of Man Medical Society. I was interested to reread the Hippocratic Oath, the long-standing oath that guides our trusted doctors to undertake their duties. It says, "I solemnly pledge that I will do my best to serve humanity, caring for the sick, promoting good health, and alleviating pain and suffering." I just want to focus for a moment on those last four words, alleviating pain and suffering. The Cambridge Dictionary currently defines alleviate as to make something bad, such as pain or problems, less severe, i.e. the drugs did nothing to alleviate her pain or suffering. But I raise this oath made by our doctors as a singular delineation and definition of what we currently expect the role of our healthcare professionals and the state is in caring for us. If this legislation is to pass into law, perhaps a more appropriate oath for the doctors and healthcare professionals willing to take part in ending life will be, I solemnly pledge I will do my best to serve humanity, caring for the sick, promoting good health, alleviating pain and suffering, and ending life when needed. Mr. Speaker, no longer will the role of the state after this legislation is through be to give and prolong life. It will now also be its role to end life. Doctors, pharmacists, psychiatrists, nurses and healthcare professionals may now all be concerned with the removal of life as much as they are concerned with care and sustaining life. In other words now, for those who are sick and ill, the role of the professional attending them has fundamentally altered, not to be just the giver of life, but someone who may well choose to support and initiate its end. Mr. Speaker, change in the social contract under which we live our lives requires a public mandate. This bill, if it passes through the House of Keys and Legislative Council and then comes into law, surely requires a public mandate. A bill that effectively ends people's lives, that kills people, requires a public mandate. A bill that alters and changes the way society treats death and suicide requires a public mandate. A bill that may define those who seek death requires a public mandate. A bill that has every chance of widening in scope the availability of assistance in death and ending of life requires a public mandate. A bill that carries with it significant opposition from the very medical professionals that we trust with our lives requires a public mandate. A bill that offers the potential to change the way the disabled and mentally impaired think about life requires a public mandate. Mr. Speaker, there is no demonstrable public mandate for this legislation. Yes, it's been discussed at times. Yes, there has been a previous select committee. Yes, a very small handful of MHKs mentioned this in their manifestos. But has there really been a public mandate to change this social contract? I mean, a clear, demonstrable, proven public mandate to change the social contract. Mr. Speaker, I suggest there has not. There was no material public debate of significance during the general election, and the consultation was just that, a consultation. In fact, Mr. Speaker, in response to question 8 of that consultation, do you agree or disagree that assisted dying should be permitted on the Isle of Man for terminally ill adults? 49.61% disagreed. A slim, but nevertheless slim majority vote in favour of no. So the only public consultation has taken place, question 8, do you agree or disagree that assisted dying should be permitted on the Isle of Man? 49.61% disagreed, a slim but nevertheless majority vote in favour of no. Mr. Speaker, this is too important to make it up as you go along. Aside from the fact that many people believe this legislation to be unworkable and flawed, nevertheless, if it is passed, and it seems that this is now going to be passed, and the social contract is proposed to be broken, then we must get a proper public mandate. In other words, the people must decide, and there must be a referendum. A referendum is not some absolution of duty, Mr. Speaker. It's not cowardice. We're put here to make difficult decisions, of course. Yes, we're also put here to govern society. But it is also our duty to determine when that governance question goes above and beyond that which is considered reasonable and fair. It is our duty to determine when the social contract that exists between the state and society is being changed, parent and to hand, whether or not they want to alter the role of the state in not only sustaining life, but also in bringing about death, and to acknowledge that the state may authorise the individuals to terminate life, and that such authorisation may, in the future potentially not just be limited to the context in which it originates today. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I have heard the chatter about preparation and cost and legislation pertaining to referendums. I urge you, honourable members, today to stick to the principle and the facts I have outlined. The rest is but detail. Important detail, but detail nonetheless. Ask yourself this: is the social contract being changed? Is the state now to be authorised to terminate life? Will this materially alter the delivery of health care to the seriously ill? If the answer to those questions is yes, ask yourself this: do I have a public mandate to do this? A referendum must surely be justified if this legislation is to pass into law. A solid, binding, majority referendum. The social contract is to be changed. The state is to alter its role. The public must surely determine that they accept this. The people need their say. Carers need their say. The disadvantaged need their say. The youngest and the oldest need their say. They need a say on the way that the social contract operates. If the health service is now to take life, then we need society to sign that contractual change.
Mr. Wallenberg.
Thank you. I beg to second that and reserve my remarks.
There's a wind blowing across the land. Common folk are joining hands. They've heard the call, they've seen the light. Now they're ready for the fight. They're the rebel army, they've come from every side. They're the rebel army singing, let the people decide. They're the rebel army, hear their battle cry. They're the rebel army singing, let the people decide. Let the people decide. Let the people decide.
1,000 years of sovereign rule, offered up on behalf of all. No questions asked, no permission sought, without a word or a second thought. But the rebel army has come from every side.